What's crapping? Stop yapping and build some shit. This is Cordell Rufus III. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about intercoolers. Basically, I bought the big ass 1200 horsepower Treadstone. I believe the normal Treadstone part number, which is still pretty big, that's rated like 1,000 horse, is a 1234, I believe, like a TR 1234. And then this guy is the step up from that. So it's got the 3-inch outlets, 3-inch inlets on each side, and then the only thing that sucks is that this thing is barely gonna fit. So I wanted to just kind of go through with you what everything that I've had to do to clearance the front of the car to attempt to get it to fit, and then also will be just I have to go down to my parents own an engineering company actually, so I have access to all their welders and CNC machines and water jets and all that shit. So a lot of what I do, we can draw it up on SolidWorks, and then I'll just have them make it. So I'm really lucky that I have a resource like that to be able to basically do everything. But I'll show you what I'm gonna have to do to make space for this thing, and really it's coming down to the brackets that hold the front bumper on stock. They look like this. So these things are designed to where this piston right here actually slides inside of that bigger piston behind it if you get into a front end crash, and it adds a little resistance to kind of absorb some of the energy from the front end collision. Well, these brackets also, as you can see, is where the front bumper mounts. So I can't use these because the distance, well, I'll show you. So the front of the car, this is where they mount, and the distance in between the posts that are in here, the shafts, on each side is less than the top of the intercooler. So I need the intercooler to slide up. It's basically got to slide up right behind this front lip in order for the bottom of it to clear the very lowest part of the bumper. So what we're gonna do is basically I'm 86ing this entire section of the bracket, which will leave us with just this one bolt hole and this section of the bracket. So what I want to do is we're going to just see if you guys can see that. We're going to just add a gusset from here on the base plate to here to lock this in, and then I'm going to cut everything else out. So these things actually swivel. So I placed the bumper and got these set to the proper angle. So we need to make sure not to move this, and then we'll just go through, and I'm going to grab a piece of plate that's going to slide under here and just go back to the base plate. We'll weld this in so that's locked in, and this whole area is set in stone now. And then I can cut off this, and basically this entire bracket aside from this section here. And that'll give me all of this room for the intercooler to slide up in place. doing some welding on some E36 2JZ swap bumper brackets. Ski.
Ski.
And I'll go ahead and put that intercooler up there so you guys can see how it's probably going to sit. And then we're going to, I'm going to add some side gussets on those as well, because we need to mount the actual intercooler to those brackets as well. But basically, we've had to cut these. So this was originally connected to obviously that area there, and it was just a really thin sheet metal bracing for this front. I think you'd call it a valance, but it's just the upper grill area. This grill area is not plastic. It doesn't really remove. Well, it does remove, but you have to unbolt it. But it's thin sheet metal. It's bodywork basically. So we had to cut all that section out so the intercooler could slide up all the way to the bottom of the headlight, just to give us a little extra room. And then on top of that, the AC condenser had a huge fan on it that ran just when the air conditioning was on. So that obviously had to go. And then this bracket right here, so this whole bracket used to run directly across, and that's actually what the fan bolted to. So I cut out that center section, and then I also bent these brackets. So this bolts to the AC condenser and holds the condenser in place, but I bent them back and flattened them back out so it has a joggle in it now, and that pushes the AC condenser all the way up against the radiator, so we have basically less than a ½ inch gap. And so what that allowed me to do is, now since I'm 86ing the fan that goes up against the AC condenser, I added weather stripping in between the AC condenser and the radiator, now that there's a lot smaller gap. And then my electric fan that's on the inside, that's on the shroud, I'm going to upgrade that into a brushless fan that'll flow twice as much CFM as the normal. And it should, since I have these two kind of sealed together now, it should draw enough air through the condenser and the radiator to where we don't need that extra fan that was up here, and that's the idea. So, I mean, we may find out that that's not the case, but it should be fine for what it is, especially once you're driving. The biggest issue, and the reason that they run those fans a lot of times, is because if you're stuck in traffic, the condenser's not working as well, and the radiator fan that's behind it is obviously, it's just for the radiator. So if we can link those two together enough and put a kick-ass fan on the back of it that just sucks like a madman, that we should be able to draw enough air across both surfaces to efficiently cool both areas. The other issue that you're probably going to run with is, since I'm going to be running air conditioning, I had to try to find a way to clearance. Let's see if we can get you in here. To clearance the AC lines. So we have, there we go. So we have these AC lines. This is obviously sticking out as the farthest point. So the plane is now at least close to the front of these bolts that hold on that front bracket, which these are going to be my limiting factor anyway with how far I can shove the intercooler back. But I've managed to bend this. You have to be really careful when you bend your AC lines, they will split. But this lower section is actually a steel line, so it was a little less stressful. But so we bent this to clearance it. Same thing with moving this bracket back as much as we could. And then we ended up with hopefully enough room to leave AC and mount the front mount intercooler. And it actually leaves us with enough of a gap in between the intercooler and the AC condenser so we can mount the oil cooler as well. So the oil cooler will essentially mount from above and hang down in between the intercooler and the AC condenser. So we should have room for pretty much everything that we need up here, as long as we get this intercooler to fucking fit. So, but I'll jack that intercooler up in there, and you can see exactly what I'm talking about as far as getting it in there and clearanced, and then we can go from there. The real issue, I think, is not necessarily getting the intercooler in there and mounted. It's going to be getting it into a position where we don't have to clearance like the entire front bumper to get it to clear. Because I don't want to cut the entire front bumper apart. But, I mean, if there's no room, there's no room. So, we're going to have to figure that out as we go. But, we'll see. So I'll switch over and I'll show you guys just what the intercooler looks like when we get it up in there. Alright, so we got the intercooler up in there, as you can see. But basically, there's this area. So what you're going to want to do is drop a tape measure down from somewhere so you have a point of reference to the bottom of your bumper. So this car had a aluminum under tray, so I simply dropped a tape measure down from here all the way down to the aluminum under tray, which gave me 18.5 inches. So I know if the intercooler is sitting off of this plane at its farthest most point at 18.5 inches, that I'm going to be at least at the level of the bottom of the main bumper, and that doesn't count the front lip. That is the bottom of the main bumper, which should give me enough ground clearance to do anything. So you're going to need a point of reference if you do that, because otherwise you're going to put the intercooler up there and then you're going to be trying to shove the bumper on, and then it's like you got to try to figure everything out. Take as many measurements as you can before you start tearing shit apart, because it's a pain in the ass to do it all again. But basically, that gigantic treadstone is set up in there, but in order for me to get the bottom plane above or within our 18.5 inch tolerance in here, the top of the intercooler needed to slide. Let me show you here. The top of the intercooler needed to slide behind this, maybe a ½ inch. So it needed to sit up higher. Basically, it's touching the bottom of the headlight housing underneath at this point. So obviously I'll clearance it from there. So I'm going to drop it down probably an 1/8 inch, maybe a 1/4 inch, just to be safe, which should still be within our 18.5 inch tolerance. So I had to cut, that's why I had to cut that small section of sheet metal bracing out, was to clearance the top of the intercooler to allow it to go up a little bit higher. I mean, all the little stuff makes a huge difference. And then we should be good. So as you can see, let's see if we can get you in here, try to get you a straight on shot. This is where that bracket mounted to hold the front bumper. So that post comes out right here, which would have obviously ran right into the back of the intercooler. So if we just use the right side of the bracket, which is this side, that bracket, the front bumper bracket, will just be over here, just clearing the intercooler, and then the bracket that we're going to weld on is just going to clear the top section over here. So, and then we can use that same bracket to just drop down and pick up these two mounting holes on the side of the treadstone. So we should be okay. We should have room to mount what we need to mount and we should be able to, I'm just going to stiffen up the plate on that particular mount to make sure that it's got enough rigidity for us to mount the actual intercooler on there. On these Treadstones, these end caps are cast, so they are not light. These Treadstone intercooler, I mean, I would probably say that that intercooler weighs a good 40 pounds. So, you know, you need to get some rigidity on the mounts, but ultimately once you have the intercooler piping and everything on it too, that adds to the rigidity, which that's going to help dampen a lot of vibration having all the piping hooked up. So it's going to give you a little bit of room for error, but if you can get your bracing good before you go, especially if you're going to be trying to fit the bumper, because you don't want it to start moving on you. But I'm probably just going to use like some 09 steel plate and just fab something up in my garage to get it there, and then we'll water jet some brackets out later, just so I can get everything fitted to my liking and get back on the road. This is my daily driver, so I'm kind of tearing this thing apart and doing the things that I know need to get done that aren't going to affect me on a daily driving situation. So, and also I'm super impatient, so I like to work and tinker on shit. But you can see, if you look at it from up here, we have, let's see if we can get it to focus in there. We have that gap. So this is the gap in between the intercooler and the AC condenser. The radiator is obviously behind this. But we're going to mount the oil cooler here off of this, and it'll slide right in between there. There's a 2-inch gap in there. And that oil cooler should work really well sitting in there. So you have to keep in mind also that, come on, let's focus there, buddy. Oh, this is horrible. I look like powder. I look like powder. Like I'm from the movie Powder. Alright. So you have to keep in mind too that now you're basically shoving a bunch of shit in front of your radiator and you're expecting it to perform the same, which is not going to happen. So, at least in the case of the intercooler and the oil cooler, you're not expecting those things to cool efficiently unless you're driving at a good speed. You do get an effect, especially if you paint them black. You get that's not a convection effect, but it dissipates heat standing without air flowing through it. It'll dissipate heat, a lot of heat actually, if you paint it all black, which I paint everything black anyway, so it was awesome for me to hear about that. There's also some studies that I think Mighty Car Mods did actually, which was really, really cool. And so you have to keep that in mind. If you're going to start shoving stuff in front of your radiator, expect there to be some cooling issues. You might want to mitigate those before you even get any farther on in the project. So we already came up with a plan. I have a new aluminum shroud coming in because we have, right now we have this aluminum shroud and the radiator fan, but the reason why they're running this crappy fan, which is a Spall, I think it's a 1300 CFM fan, which isn't it's not a crappy fan, but it's a low profile fan, is because the stock S52 engine in this BMW has like no room in between the radiator and the pulleys. So that 2JZ should actually have a lot more room up here. So we shouldn't run into any issues with space, and if that's the case, we'll run the other fan shroud and I'll put on a brushless 16-inch fan, which should flow at least 2000 CFM, and there's actually another Cyclone fan made by a different company that flows about 2500 CFM, so we're basically doubling the CFM. But that thing is fucking thick. So that Cyclone fan is probably not going to work. I don't think we're going to have enough room to run that, but yeah, so those are just things you're going to probably need to take into account when you're doing something like this, especially when you're doing like a retrofitment, where you're obviously this stuff did not come with these things stock, and even the radiator fan stuff, this thing came with like a clutch fan, and obviously that got removed. But so keep that stuff in mind. I'm going to, I'll take some pictures and we'll go through just kind of how I made the brackets and everything. And then obviously I'll do like a time lapse of me getting the intercooler mounted and then trying to figure out if the front bumper will even fit. So let's go, let's do this shit. Okay, so I finally got the front mount intercooler mounted. I'm going to kind of show you guys what all I did and what I had to do. It is super fucking hot out here, but basically the front bumper brackets used to look like this. So they had an entire side section and this post that actually, this post slides into the front frame during a front impact. And I needed to get rid of that. So my solution was to just basically get rid of that. That's where that post used to connect, which was obviously in the way of the intercooler. So we welded a chromoly plate to the bottom of the bumper bracket and back to the same bracket. And then I was able to cut all of that out and leave this bracket in place where it was stock. And then I added a chromoly angle bracket to the intercooler that bolts to the chromoly bracket that we welded on. So basically that's what we had to do. It was a huge pain in the ass. This Treadstone intercooler is gigantic and it barely fits. Well, in reality it doesn't fit, but we made it work. So but it ended up looking, I mean, it looks rad. It's definitely going to flow enough air. The front bumper barely clears. I mean, it's going to be touching in a couple spots, but the thing is, the intercooler is mounted to the same bracket as the bumper now, so they should be moving in unison, which should minimize rub. Obviously, there's still going to be rub, but it should be somewhat minimal. Some of the major shit I had to cut out was the aluminum brace. So this section in here is aluminum, and it just has some plastic grommets that hold it to the actual bumper, and that aluminum piece is actually what bolts to the car. So I had to clearance all of that out, obviously, which, I mean, that aluminum member is pretty strong anyway. But I mean, aside from that, as far as the actual bumper goes, I had to clearance the aluminum and then clearance just some sections on the corners, which will obviously be underneath the lip on the valance. So we'll get the front bumper on there, bolted up and everything back together, and then I'll get the car down and show you guys what it looks like with it all done. But we're gonna keep I'm gonna keep the intercooler on there even though we're a ways out from needing it. I just plugged the ends, but I want to see if the cooling system that we have now is still going to work with the front mount in front of it, which obviously is, I'm basically only testing the resistance right now. I'm not actually testing the air quality that's going to be going through it, because if there is a hot charge coming in and a cold charge coming out, whatever heat is lost through the air exchange is going to be thrown into the radiator. So that air is going to be much hotter than the air that's coming in now. So, but I mean, it'll give us an idea. If we have a major problem right now, we should have an issue cooling. But if we don't, then we should be okay. And then we can just add that brushless motor and all that other shit that I talked to you guys about already. So I'll get this damn thing finished and then we'll take a look at it. Okay guys, we finally got it done. Top tip, buy one of these fucking things. So this actually plugs into the side holes on the frame where you would normally put your BMW jack, that little port on the side where the little circle plug is. This slides in there and then you have a pad to jack up your car with. It makes it a million times easier. We finally got the front mount intercooler on there. It took pretty much all fucking day. So I'll just kind of go over with you how everything worked out. So we didn't really have to trim much. I mean, there's not really much
contact here. These end pieces are actually going to go away. I'm going to weld 90s straight onto the intercooler to get rid of some of the couplers up here. And as you can see, I mean, it came out pretty nice. That intercooler is actually all the way up here. So it covers this whole area, and then I ended up with a good sized space in between. You're not going to be able to see that, but yeah, we got it all done. So I mean, it took a minute, but we got it all finished, and it looks really nice. It clears. I lost my fog lights, which I had HID fog lights before. Those are gone. I don't think they'll fit even if I weld 90s on there, nor do I really give a shit if they fit. I kind of like the look where you can see the intercooler piping through the, let's see if I can do this, through the ports where the fog lights go. So you'll be able to see the intercooler piping go out and then go back up into there. But yeah, turned out pretty good. We got it all done, mounted, chrome ollie brackets, all that good shit. It's not going anywhere, and we'll try out the cooling system and see if that needs to be altered. I'm sure it probably, I mean, I'm going to alter it anyway. I'm going to add a brushless fan anyway, just to be safe, because I don't really have room to go for a larger intercooler, or I mean a larger radiator in there. I have the Michitoyo, or fucking whatever, how you say it. I have that one in there already with a shroud, so we're just going to upgrade the fan, and hopefully that'll take care of it. But I'm going to go drive the car since it's still hot out, and let it run the AC at full blast, just kind of while it's idling with just the radiator fan going, and make sure that the AC doesn't get backed up or hot or whatever. But I could have avoided a lot of that shit if I just didn't want to have AC, but I think it'd be rad to have a 1200 horsepower E36 that has air conditioning too. So fuck it. Hope you guys liked the video. Like and subscribe, all that good shit. Build some shit.